guys are amazing, and you've been doing such an outstanding job over the last few months. And I just wanted to speak to that this afternoon, just a bit about leadership. I shared last time about taking a good team to becoming a great team, and talked about the four C's of great teams. And so today I just want to talk about taking your leadership, your personal leadership, from good to great. And some of these principles I know that you guys adhere to almost all the time, but I do think that some of these things are just really helpful reminders. And when I had a look over this morning, I was thinking there are some of these things that you can really never hear too much. And there are a few like key attributes of great leaders that when you observe them, you kind of there's a few attributes, a few qualities that always seem to rise to the surface of those kinds of leaders who just they're the leaders that you admire, the leaders that get things done, the leaders that have those characteristics and quality traits that you kind of wish that you had. And I've got a few that I think, for me personally, they really resonate with me, and I think there's some things that will be helpful for all of us. The first one of those attributes is simplicity. Good leaders. I heard a quote in researching this that says, "Any fool can make something complicated. It takes a genius to make it simple." And look, I am the worst at simplifying things, to be honest, if I'm fair, and it's something that I have to work at. But once the work's done and you've spent the time to crystallize a complex idea or thought down, it's such an empowering tool that you have, that you can articulate something with such depth so simply. And great leaders, I think Rachel actually does this really well. One of the best people that I know who can take a really complex idea or complex ideas and have them not just make sense for her, and not just to be able to articulate them for others, but to have others be able to participate in the particular vision or complex task or program that needs to be done. And great leaders, they stick with a problem or an idea long enough, and they engage with it deeply enough to make a clear way forward through what other people might see as an impossible, an impossible barrier. And so I think I've observed Rachel this really well over the years, and it's not the same as dumbing something down. It's very different. It means that they make the concept really easily accessible, and because it's easily accessible, like I said, people can actually get on board with it and actually help out and get it done. And I try and encourage our preachers to do this as well. So in a message, if you can't say your message in a sentence, then you haven't done enough work. You haven't got it. It's not in you. You should be able to say, what are you speaking on Tuesday night? And in one sentence, say the whole thing. If you can't, you've got to keep working it out until you know exactly what it is that you want that person in that room to walk away with at the end of that message. And we did this even some time ago, a few years ago now, and you probably don't even realise this, but every time we say, everybody has a next step, what's yours? Oh, it's not as good when you're in Zoom. Everybody has a next step. What's yours?
What's yours?
So enthusiastic.
We all know what that means, right? But behind all of that, behind that simple phrase, everybody has a next step. What's yours? There's layers. There's layers of why. There's layers of work. There's deep work that's happened to get that step. Everybody has everybody has a next step. Everybody. That means people who aren't a part of the church yet, people who are a part of the church yet, they've got a next step. Everyone wants to see everyone move forward. What's yours? It's an invitation. It's something that we intentionally present every opportunity we've got to every person in every location and every service. But behind that statement is also all the work, like all the systems, and all the processes that take any person anywhere from where they are to what's next, every single step of their spiritual journey. So that's just an example, simplicity, and it's worth doing. The second thing that I think takes a good leader to a great leader, the second attribute is, and I talked about this last week with teams, and it's actually just as applicable for individual leadership. And I think it's actually very applicable to us as an organisation, as a church right now, and that is clarity. Because in leadership, And if you've led anything for any amount of time, you'll know that in leadership, confusion reigns until someone makes something clear. So, and that's what leaders do. Clarity is what great leaders bring to the table. They're able to get people together. They're able to get ideas to get out. They're able to get voices heard. They're able to get complexity, heard. But then they're also able to say, well, okay, that's all great information. That's great input. They're great thoughts. But here's what we're doing, and here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to move forward. And the best way, this is actually something practical, the best way to really clarify as a leader the issue is to ask questions. And I've said this before, but I just find it so refreshing when I meet high capacity leaders and leaders that have gone further than I have and have achieved more than I have. I've found that they're always still asking questions of everyone everywhere, just so they can understand it. They just want clarity. Like, why do you do that? How's that done? When do they do this? And where do they go when they do that? And why have you said this? And why didn't you say that? They're just always asking questions. And sometimes you might have to, and this is what I don't like about clarity, is you can never have it straight away. I just wish we could just have it now. This is clear, let's just move on. But sometimes it takes, days, sometimes it takes weeks for, ideas to develop and for questions to get asked and for the process to be, developed, and what we discussed in our executive team today about the project that Rebecca has been working on, that is something that does need to have clarity brought to it, and I just wish that we would know what to do tomorrow, but obviously we won't. But what I do know is if we keep asking the right questions and we keep giving it the time that it needs, then the way forward will become clear. And I think that's what, as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to bring the clarity and not just to move ahead into ambiguity, to be like, yep, okay, this is our next step and this is how we move forward. So great leaders are always bringing clarity to the table. They're not happy to walk away without knowing what the next step is, and also giving the people time they need to bring clarity to the project. The third thing, and this is actually something that's one of my little bugbears, so you might get a rant here if you're lucky, and that is ownership.
Get a rant.
So have you ever noticed that the best leaders rarely make excuses? So this is ownership, number 3. Great leaders, good leaders to great leaders own it. They own their leadership. So have you ever noticed that the best leaders, they rarely make excuses, and the leaders who make the most progress make the fewest excuses. So you can make excuses or you can make progress, but you can't make both. And I'm really passionate about that particular thought, that whenever there's anything that's happening within the life of what you are in charge of, your team, your department, your location, your workplace, your family, if you want to lead in that space, then the buck has to stop with you. The moment you make an excuse, you immediately relinquish all power and authority to lead the very thing that you've been entrusted to lead. You have to take ownership, and you have to be okay with the fact that everything is your fault. Like it's all on you. And the moment you realize that, it actually becomes very liberating, because you immediately then take ownership and control over the thing that you are entrusted to lead. So you can't have both. You can't just be like, oh, that's Dave's fault. Oh, why isn't this done? Oh, yeah, I asked Sue to do that. Oh, if only Sue had have done that. Oh, that would have been so good. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'll go and chase her up and make sure that gets done. And that's not leadership. That's just excuse making. Leadership is, yeah, you're right. I'll get that done. And if you've got to go and ask Sue about it, go and ask Sue and have a meeting with her on her own. But it's always your fault if it's not getting done. And it's the same. Like if something happens, in the online location on Monday night, and the camera breaks again or something, that's still Rachel and my responsibility as the leaders of Beyond Church. So we have to own that it's not working because of us. We can't be like, oh yeah, Josh didn't buy the new camera fast enough, blah, 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 blah. Like there's a whole range of reasons why that's not working, but the ultimate person responsible is me. Like, and unless I take ownership of that, it's not going to move forward at all. So ownership is critical, and great leaders are okay with that. They're okay with owning and taking responsibility of everything they've been entrusted with. This is also great. Number 4, this says great leaders are leaders of faith. They're leaders of faith. They have a faith-filled mindset. They're faith builders. So a scarcity mindset will kill organisations, will kill church over the long haul. So scarcity mindset is like, there's oh, we just won't have enough. I just don't think we'll get there. Or if only this, or if only that. So there are seasons where we do have to be measured, and there are seasons where we do have to have some restraint around what we do. But we do have to have a budget and have accountability. I get all that. But as leaders, if we only ever think small, then we will always stay small. So if we don't think that it's possible, it's just never going to be possible. And, we've got to be big people and we've got to be faith-filled, that have the heart to believe that there are things that can get done that are beyond us. Great leaders are faith-filled leaders, that they know that in their own strength it's impossible, but with God, right? Faith-filled leaders. And this is so true of Beyond Church, and I've seen it, over and over again. And what I actually love about this particular thing is that in a leadership context like the one we have here at Beyond Church, sometimes, you might not be the most faith-filled person, but there's always somebody in the room that has the faith to believe what's next if you haven't got it. We can't always be, the most faithful person in the room, but someone has to be. Someone's got to be, and maybe in this room at this time, it's your turn. So don't be afraid to say the outrageous thing. Don't be afraid to be the one that thinks to themselves, oh, I actually think that we could do that. And, you've got to bring that to the table. Great leaders are the kind of leaders that they're faith-filled and they're willing to say, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do this. I believe that we've got what it takes, and that, even if it's not in our own strength, God's going to step up and meet this, and meet us where we're lacking. So great leaders are faithful leaders. This is actually really good too. There's a really good thoughts. Number 5, to go from a good leader to a great leader takes prioritization. And this is something that I've really worked on over the years. And as I've done it, it's actually really, really helped me. And I actually now really love to do this. So prioritization is really asking this question: what and who matters today? What and who matters today? So what I think would be fun is if you could, at the age of, 21 or whatever, you just write your calendar, and then you just leave it like that until you die, and you just do all the appointments and meet all the meetings, and you never have to change it ever again. You never have to adjust your priorities. Imagine that. Imagine having a family and kids with a 21-year-old's calendar. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Imagine how that'd work.
That's a recipe for divorce, is what it is.
That'd be fantastic. But the truth is, through life, you have to adjust your priorities. You have to prioritize stuff, right? Because things come along. Either you create new things like children, or, you get a new job, or you lose a job, or then priorities change. You find a wife, or you find a husband, or you lose a wife, or you lose a husband. There's things that change in our world that we have to be able to adjust for. And so what great leaders do is they continually assess and reassess how they spend their time, how they spend their energy, how they spend their resources. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine just a few months ago. He's getting a bit older now, and so he's in a stage of life where he's reassessing this very thing, his priorities, and he's reassessing his energy expenditure. He's got to actually measure and monitor not just the level of energy, but when he expends his energy. And so therefore he schedules meetings around his most energetic time of day, and doesn't schedule meetings around times where he's feeling a bit flat. And he won't schedule heavy thinking meetings where he's got to invest a lot of emotional energy before he needs to spend time being creative or having a board meeting, or because he knows that he just hasn't got the energy. So he has to reprioritize his time and his energy expenditure. Same is true for our finances. So what we need to be doing is thinking, when do I need to be reassessing my priorities and reallocating my time and my resources in my calendar? There are some people that I need to meet, and there's some people that I shouldn't be meeting right now. There are some activities that I need to get done, and other activities that I don't need to get done, and that will change. And so here's my question: if you haven't rewritten your calendar or reprioritized your appointments recently, then you're probably stuck. if you kind of think to yourself, oh yeah, well, I did that 12 months ago and it's pretty much the same today. Well, you're probably stuck. And guess what? The reason you're stuck is probably because you haven't done that. You haven't made room in the calendar for the next. You haven't made room in the calendar for the new. You haven't made room in the calendar for vision. You haven't made room in the calendar for dreaming. And, I just think it's so important. And I've noticed that Andrew and Rebecca, they've implemented this into their schedule, where they have some time set aside on a regular basis to kind of revision and recast, their future. And I think that that's great. And it's a high level, high order thinking thing to do. And if it's a high priority, high order, high level thinking thing to do, then we should be doing it regularly, so that we're not getting stuck doing all the things that just keep us where we're at. So prioritization is key. Great leaders always make room in their calendar for reassessing and realigning all their values and their priorities, their time, their energy expenditure, and all their resources. So second last one, nearly finished, is self-discipline. And I've talked about this before. Self-discipline's the fruit of the Spirit anyway. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So self-control is a Spirit-led life. It's just taking responsibility for your actions, and taking responsibility for your own health, for your own attitudes, taking responsibility for your own schedule, things like, oh, look, I'm too busy, haven't got enough time. And great leaders never have to say that. Great leaders, they've got clarity around all these things. They're disciplined around all these things, the words they say. They take responsibility for even the mistakes they make and the decisions they make. So I just want to encourage us as leaders to continue to do what we've been doing. And I'm just so excited that we have a group of leaders within Life of Our Church who do apply these self-disciplines to their life. And I think it's one of the key things that's helped us as leaders grow over the years. We've applied, things like, our being attentive to our, personal health, and our thinking, going through that discipline of doing our words to live by, and our regular Bible reading and Bible plans together, and just being in life group and having good friends in our world, and making sure those things are key. So that self-discipline around all that stuff really separates those who are just average leaders or good leaders to great leaders. And finally, and this is something that's not as easy to find. I think it's actually not. It's not as easy to do as it sounds. This seventh attribute of great leaders is humility. And we all kind of say that we're humble, right? But like, if we maybe you don't, but we're kind of like, you wouldn't ever say, oh no, I'm not humble, I'm really proud. You wouldn't say that, would you? You would say, hey, would you say you're humble or proud? Oh, I'm really humble. So it's unlikely that you would say that you're heaps humble. And the reality is that true humility actually does come at a significant cost. And to be honest, and I'm being honest, I don't really want to have to pay the price of humility, because humility is expensive. It's not something that you just can say that you are. It's something there's a great book that I've read, which I've recommended to you before. I know Andrew's just recently read it or is reading it, is Leading with a Limp. And this guy talks about the fact that humility, that it's one of the greatest attributes of a leader, but it is the most expensive attribute for you to own, because it comes at such a deep cost to your own personal life, because you have to die to yourself for humility to rise within your life. And so there has to be less of you and more of Jesus at work in your life. And the character of Jesus is absolutely impossible for us to emulate at 100%. But the more that we want to be like Jesus, the more that we actually live like Jesus, the less of us is actually. And that, if it doesn't hurt, then it's not happening. The transformation is just not happening. And this isn't just true for the Christian world, like the Christian, space. It's also true just the corporate world. Jim Collins, in his famous book, Good to Great, all the research he did actually pointed to the fact that the greatest corporate leaders are actually really humble people. And because they believe in a cause that's greater than themselves. It's not about them. They're serving something greater. For us, we're serving the kingdom. And in our context, we're serving the mission and vision of Beyond Church. And, they don't expect it to meet their personal needs. They don't expect it to serve their agenda. They're willing to give all that up for something that's actually got nothing to do with their own personal win. To give us a Beyond Church example, we actually had to work really hard over the years as, when Rachel and I first started leading Beyond Church. And this is still prevalent in some churches, not just in our movement, but, around the place, where we had to work hard to dismantle the man of God culture that was a part of Beyond Church, and it is still a part of many churches today, that there's a man of God, and that man of God is the one who we all admire and we all look up to and we put on a pedestal, and he's the aspirational identity of the organisation. He's the man of God. And we had to work hard to dismantle the man of God culture when we came into the life of Beyond Church. And a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people much preferred just to defer all authority and all power or responsibility to one person as opposed to taking on for themselves. And so what we've had to do is we've had to actually rebuild a culture which is a people of God culture. So we had to dismantle a man of God culture and rebuild a people of God culture where everybody takes ownership, of their own leadership in their own lives, and they're all becoming like Christ, all dying to themselves, and all becoming great leaders of humility. And so if we want to be great leaders, we do have to die to ourselves and be more like Christ as we lead, which is a hard call to answer. But what I love is that Beyond Church, as leaders, we're all on that journey together. And I think that you are all doing an exceptional job at being humble leaders, self-disciplined leaders, leaders that prioritise, faith-filled leaders, leaders that own, what you're entrusted, that you are leaders of clarity, and you're leaders who are helping to simplify things so other people can get on board with where we're going. So I just thought that might be helpful for us this afternoon, some of those thoughts.